Hello everyone and welcome to Underwater Adventures with Alex Mirabal. Today we have a very special episode because we will be talking about buried treasures inland, in this case in Cuba. Okay, it's buried treasures inland, but we will still dive into it.
Hey everyone! If you want to watch the video in other languages, you simply click on Settings, go to Subtitles, select the subtitles in the original language, then go back to Subtitles, activate the Translate automatically, and scroll down and select your preferred language. In this case, we chose Spanish, obviously. Thank you so much all, and let's get on with the video.
Maybe you will be wondering why I bring buried treasures inland to my channel if what I do is maritime archaeology. The reason is that the company I work for in Cuba, Perico, that company, it was maritime archaeology and shipwrecks and the study of shipwrecks, but we also had the task, there are various tasks aside of the main one, which was maritime archaeology, and one of them was to confirm and try to find the stories of these treasures that have been buried in the national territory. It is very curious how some countries, I think it's not only Cuba, but some countries, certainly America, most of the countries, Southeast Asia also, I have experienced that in some countries. I'm not aware Europe or Africa if they have the same stories, but how buried treasure is inside the folklore and the tradition of many of the populations of these countries. You can go to any corner in Cuba, the most isolated place, whatever, randomly you select one, you go there, you sit with the locals, you ask them if they have any story of a buried treasure, and they will. There will be a buried treasure in every corner of Cuba, at least. You do that in Mexico and Guatemala, it will be the same. People have this imaginary about buried treasures or buried values that is always so attractive. So we had the task of interviewing, obviously in a population that have so much of these stories, we had the task to interview people with these kind of stories. They come to us and tell us that they know about the treasure here or there and if we can go and check it out. And that from there came out a lot of interesting stories. I want to share those with you because I never expected to be involved in this kind of stories because my thing is maritime archaeology, shipwrecks, and suddenly you have this side work, which it was really fun. I will share that with you. I tell you in advance, we had more than 500 interviews with different people with different stories. That big it was. We had to make a big archive with these folders with each of the files of the different stories and which one were worth pursuing and going there and trying to check them up.
So that's how big the sample is. 500 is not 5 people. Like that you can make considerably accurate assumptions after interviewing 500 people, I would say.
It is. It's a very big, I would say, sample size because 500 people is quite a lot. It's 500 different stories.
Yeah.
And that made it, at least from the human point of view, it is very interesting why people come up with these stories.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about that because we were faced, for instance, with myth and legends. You know that these are different. There is a difference between myth and legends. Myth are the ones that these stories that come out of a concept, come out of an idea, and they are mainly imaginary. Legends, on the other side, they have some ground, they have some base in real events. So when you are trying to investigate these cases, it gets difficult where to
separate and distinguish
one from the other and what is actually true and what is not. So we went into dissecting these interviews and tried to find these treasures I want to share with you today. The first one, it came to us, funny enough, not through that kind of interviews, but through the company, through the direction of the company. One person who was in contact with the direction of the company brought this story, and we went there to try to find out. It was supposedly a treasure in a cave. Inside the cave, caves are perfect for treasure. Everyone loves caves as container of treasures. And this cave in particular was nearby a beach in Matanzas province, which is a province to the east of Havana, quite nearby a beach which is called El Mamey. So the Mamey beach, Playa El Mamey. I don't know the name of the fruit in English, man. It's
Mamey is papaya?
No,
No?
Mamey is Mamey.
Yeah, I mean neither then.
Papaya is a different thing. It's a tropical fruit. El Mamey. I will find it out. You will put it in
I'll put a picture, yeah.
Okay. In Playa El Mamey or Mamey Beach, there was a cave nearby. It was not right on the coast. It was slightly inland, and there was supposedly a big treasure. So there we went, because also this person who brought the information was a very important person in the country, so it was something that we would try to get through, not to simply discard because it's another treasure story. So we went there. Inside the cave, when you walk inside the cave a couple of 100 meters, there is like a lagoon. There is a big lake inside the cave where supposedly the treasure was down there. We dove in that lake. The first day we went there, a couple of divers, we went down. We checked. It was a very difficult dive because in caves, caves have all these galleries and things which sometimes you don't even fit to go in with your bottles and your gear, and we couldn't see any. We couldn't check. We couldn't confirm that there was anything there. Actually, during the dive, I was thinking how someone would put anything of value here. Sounds very strange. But in any case, to use all our capabilities to tell that person, hey man, we did everything that was in our hands, someone came up with the idea of pumping the water out of that lake, so dry it up. We can walk in and go down and go with the metal detectors and do everything in our hands to find the treasure. So we got one of our workers, one deckhand from one of our ships. He was recently incorporated in the company, so he was the perfect person to go there and watch the water pump that we put there to drain that lake out, take all the water out. That is a crazy job. So the man was left there with the pump for several weeks. This pump was pumping water out of that lake, and we went like every day. It was 1.5 hour drive from Havana. It was not far, but we went every day there to give him food and stuff and essentials so he could live he was living in the cave.
Oh my God, that's literally the worst rookie job in the world.
Yeah, he had this mattress there and his radio and listening to the radio in the evenings, I don't know, and watching the pump and putting fuel in the pump. And
work-life balance was very different back then, yeah.
We were draining that pond or that lake inside the cave. Quite dark, actually. But we went every day to give him supplies, and after the third day that we went there, I realized the water is not going down. He has been pumping water for 72 hours, and the water is not going down.
Okay, yeah, the water in the cave. I was not understanding. I was like, how is it not going down?
The water of the lake inside the cave was not lowering the level.
Yeah. And
I said, does anyone has tested this water? Is fresh water or is seawater?
Yeah.
So that was like immediately, let's check it out. It was seawater. So the man was trying. Yeah, obviously
clearly
there is an entrance underneath, and it was full of seawater. So he was trying to drain the ocean.
Oh my God.
From a cave for several days. But look, we realized that, and we said, most probably we are sucking seawater from 100 meters to 100 meters away. But it's seawater. It will never go down. We will never be able to drain this. But the decision was like, let's give it more couple of weeks. So,
let's make 100% sure that we cannot drain the ocean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Probably our ships out there in the office will be stranded already because it has no enough water underneath.
Correct.
But that was one of the most crazy experiences with treasures inland, buried treasures either in a cave or inland. Obviously, we stopped that nonsense after a couple of weeks, as we promised. And yeah, if any of you, my fellow Cubans, if you have heard about any story in the cave on Playa del Mamey, take it off. You will not find treasure inside that cave, at least. In that one, you will not find it. We already checked it up, and there is no treasure there. Another interesting story about treasures inside the cave. This one is more a legend than a myth, but it has a very funny combination of how the mind of the human being works. It's in the western side of Cuba, in the western end of the country, there is the Guanacabibes Peninsula, which has been always an isolated place. It has few little populations, like a little town of, 25, 30 people. Today is a national reserve, but today, from many years already, it's a national reserve, so you are not allowed to go there. There is no development like building anything, so it's quite a wild place. In this part of the country, there was, in the end of the 17th century or beginning of the 18th century, there was a famous pirate which was called Perjuicio. And Perjuicio, there are lots of stories about this Perjuicio pirate who was operating in that area. This is a real character. This is a real person. This is a guy who attacked Spanish ships. They created the system to bring the ships close to land, and when they wrecked, they went and pillaged them. So this is a real character. It's a real story. This history in our stories. So here we have, obviously, Perjuicio being active for so many years in that area. There is a cave of Perjuicio and there is a beach of Perjuicio. So everything there, it has the stamp of this pirate. And obviously, there were plenty of stories of treasure hidden in Perjuicio's cave. He hid treasures there in the cave, and it has never been found because there were two women, and that is when myth comes in. There were two women that were converted, one in a snake and the other one in an alligator, and they both guard this treasure. So this is what people of the area know about that place. We knew the cave of Perjuicio, it's in the charts, it's there. It's one of the caves that is known in the country in geography. But for you to realize how active the memory of the population is and how deceiving can be in some moments, we were 10 years earlier doing survey in the coast of that place, in the sea, for our maritime archaeological work. We were searching for shipwrecks in that area, and we were marking inland our points to organize our survey. So the captain of one of our boats, Rafaelito, he went down to land one day and he painted with red paint a cross in one rock that we will take as reference to, okay, from that rock onwards we haven't explored, we have explored only in this side. So it was a visual mark that we have from the sea, a big cross and an outstanding rock that you could see from far. 10, 12 years later, when we went there, before going to the cave of Perjuicio to look for that treasure, we interview the locals, people who live there. We interview them. This is something we did with certain frequency because the oral tradition is also something very important to record during historical research and stuff. So everyone started telling us that Perjuicio left that cross there, that he was marking the place. From the cross, you go, I don't know how many meters to the cave. So they have incorporated that cross already, cross that we made.
So you saw in real time how a myth or a legend is created.
How a legend is created. It was not Perjuicio, it was Rafaelito, but that was already incorporated in the narrative.
From something that you know for a fact that you did yourself, that wasn't there before.
We saw it in front of me. It's not another story. He made the cross with the purpose. It was not related with Perjuicio or any treasure or anything. So obviously we went to the Perjuicio cave. Neither the alligator or the snake were there. Neither was the treasure. And we explored the cave. It was a very fun expedition. But the more interesting part of this story is how quick, it was only 10, 12 years, how quick events or signals that people cannot understand quickly are incorporated in the legends of the area.
Into the folklore, yeah.
In the folklore.
Totally.
So that is very good to see.
Yeah.
And it also, as a researcher, you have to have that in mind. When you are going to do your research in places you don't have, for instance, this very clear confirmation that it's not true.
Totally. It kind of was like a confirmation bias of the awareness that you have to have as an archaeological researcher and scientist to make sure that the information that you're trying to gather is as accurate as possible, or always keep in mind that there is a 20% that maybe give or take that won't be fully...
Exactly. This is
true.
why I mentioned in the beginning how difficult it is to navigate this information, how difficult it is to tell apart what is strictly true and what is not.
Yeah.
And now I bring another case. This one is not a legend or a myth from local people. This was a treasure map we got from the archive. From the archives. I mean, for us researchers, archives are like
the holy grail.
The big truth. Whatever it comes from the archives, I mean, it could be slightly different of reality, but it's what it has. Well, this is derrotero in Spanish, but it's like a map which is guiding you to a treasure. Inland, there again, in that western part of Cuba, in the Guanacabibes Peninsula. Obviously, getting that from an archive, it gave it a lot of credibility, and we all were very excited. So there was a map marking everything. The only red flag that it raised when we got the map, this treasure map, is that was referring that the treasure of the Mérida Cathedral in Mexico that was supposedly ransacked and the treasure was put in ships, and some of these ships sank in the Guanacabibes Peninsula, and these treasures were put in that cave, in that place. We knew that the Mérida story was not true. That is a legend. It's not even a legend. That might have been a myth, because the Mérida Cathedral was never ransacked. It never had this treasure that is described in some of the adventures book. And there are many people who still believe that they will find the Mérida Cathedral treasure, but that never existed. So that was like, well, maybe it's not the Mérida Cathedral, but the guy got it wrong.
Yeah.
And there's still some treasure there, so let's go.
Yeah.
And we went, and this is some things that for all my friends looking for treasure inland, please have this in mind. When this is something very old, we are talking about 1600 something, I mean 1650 something. Check on the mark of the reference points that this map would have.
Yeah.
Because we did, and a little bit late. Once we were there in the jungle.
Of course.
In a place that mosquitoes are making your life a hell. It is very hard to be 2 or 3 days living and sleeping in tents over there. With this map, like kids, we were like kids with this map, following all the signals or all the reference that the map has, that mountain against this cliff and everything. So we went all the way to a point in which the next mark was a tree.
In a jungle full of trees.
Well, it's supposed to be a prominent tree.
Okay, fair enough.
About 300 years ago.
See.
Not there anymore. So in the last point, we were like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
It's like if you put in a map that cow, which is there.
Yeah.
When you go 300 years later, certainly the cow will not be there. So
trees are less movable than cows,
but they die.
Still.
They die.
They also die,
after some years, they die. So that we found out at the end of the story was like, oops, we shouldn't have come anyway, because the last 3 signals were some trees that were in a funny shape or something. Anyway, the story of the Mérida Cathedral treasure is anyway not true. Then with a little bit deeper investigation of this document, obviously our historians and our researchers from the historical files, it did a little bit of a due diligence on the document and said, look, here the person who wrote this is certainly a hoax, because the person who wrote this is using, for instance, monetary units that didn't exist at the
that
time.
Yeah.
So it's about 100 years later that some kind of currency started being used.
Sure.
So it was all fake. It came from the archive, but it was all fake. And we fall like little kids going after a treasure in the middle of nowhere. We had a lot of hardship to find out that, we could be also tricked.
Yeah, clearly.
in this case. So this is another funny treasure from the western end of Cuba. Another type, a different type of treasures, these all come from interviews, is the treasures in the houses. In Cuba, there is very spread belief among the people that every big mansion or every big house in the city was in the past belonging to a very rich family, that they certainly left some treasure there. Okay, as a part of these interviews, obviously, there came one person who said that the house that he was living in this moment, there was a treasure because he knew, because of the cousin or some friend of his wife, that there was a treasure, that it was in the walls of his bathroom.
Aha, okay.
It was inside the wall.
Yeah.
We tried to tell him, hey man, that's difficult. How do we find out? No, you guys have the means, I mean, the metal detectors and everything. So went with the guy to his house, three of us, and he said, pass the metal detector here in this wall. Just sweep it there. So I put the metal detector there, and obviously beeps. It's like it's everywhere.
It's full of pipes of course.
And electric cable, and I don't know what
Metals.
is inside the wall.
Yes.
Obviously, the metal detector rang very strongly, and he said, "You see, there's the treasure."
Oh God.
And I asked him, we need to break your wall
to make sure,
to check it's a treasure.
Yeah.
It could be pipes. He said, no, what do you mean pipes? It's treasure.
It's obviously a treasure.
I'm certainly that's the treasure. I said, man, it's your house. We will break the wall. We will not repair it. So I said, I will repair it with the treasure. Good logic.
Great answer.
There comes my friend with this big sledgehammer. I goes like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Boom! All these tiles and everything in the bathroom. It was a beautiful bathroom because it was a great house.
Probably tiles that are not produced anymore.
Imagine, that
of
was
course.
Impossible to replace. But that thing started flying around, and the hole getting bigger and bigger, and obviously there is no treasure. There was pipes and all this plumbing. And then when he saw that the hole was big enough, he said, no, stop. I don't want you to destroy anything else.
Yeah.
In the backyard of my primary school,
yeah.
there was a big mango tree, huge mango tree. We all ate mangoes from that tree when we were kids. And it's nearby the house of this guy in the, let's say, the noble area of Havana, where the biggest houses where the most rich people lived in the past. And then again, we got the information that under the tree, there was a treasure, but really deep under the tree. We went there with metal detectors. I mean, for me, going to my primary school was already a very nice trip. So I knew I played there. And the metal detector rang. We opened in the ground. This time was in the ground under the mango tree, just to find, after like 1.5 meters, just to find some oil cans, these rectangular cans that had oil inside it. Cooking oil. Yeah. But the big ones. Yeah. Very old indeed. I mean, very old, like 40, 50 years old. And they were really deep. How anyone came with that idea that was a treasure, or how do they knew? That's beyond my understanding. But the fact was that we were like opening that hole
to retrieve some cans of oil.
A lot of hours to retrieve some kinds of oils. Okay. Then we have the last treasure that I will mention is the treasure in a well. And this is a very clear example of a legend. In one of the interviews, one person said in the central province in Cuba, in Villa Clara, that there was a treasure in a well that goes into the ground, and this well, in the bottom of the well, there was a tunnel to a side, and in that tunnel there was a chamber or a dome from which there were 4 chains and a chest clinging on those chains.
So not only is there a pocket in this tunnel, but also somebody put hanging chains, to hang a treasure chest?
Exactly, which was full of gold and everything you can imagine.
Okay.
And that well has been closed or sealed with a big rock.
Okay.
So the story was so interesting that we said, okay, let's go. We went there, 3 of us. We talked to the authorities. I mean, remember, we were a company, government company. We were not like 3 friends. We were in representation of a government company. We talked to the authorities in the area for them to give us a truck and a tractor and something to take a crane to take that big rock off. Because when we arrived to the place, they showed us a rock. I said, okay, it's below this rock.
That's very The Ring coded. That's very much, that person was like, ah, yeah, I've seen it in movies before. You can just lift it.
It's under the rock.
Okay.
So, okay, cool. So we went with the crane and the tractor and the truck and everything. We removed this huge rock. It was a huge rock. We removed this huge rock and there was a well.
Yeah.
There was a hole in the ground that went down about 4 meters.
Okay.
Dry. There was no water in it, but only at the very bottom of this chimney, there was a little bit of mud and water in it.
Yeah.
So there we went down there. We, for that expedition, took very little dive bottles that we called at the time ponies, like the little horse, because there were bottles like this with 4 liters capacity. The normal dive bottle we have between 12 and 18 liters. So imagine a 4-liter bottle. This has almost no air. You have no autonomy. You dive with that few minutes. We took them just in case that we need to dive. When we see this little water, say, well, there is no reason to dive here because it's just a corner of this chimney. It has a little bit of water. So we went down with ropes and everything, arrived there. I put my gear, went into that hole, and suddenly there was a bigger space down there. You need to dive.
Yeah.
So 2 of us went in, we put the line so we could come back because this is black water. This is muddy water. It's almost liquid mud. And we were diving, going around with torches. Torches were of no use, but we have the torches anyway. And we end up in this chamber. This dome actually exists. You could stand in the ground and take your head out of the water, and you have this dome
with a pocket of air. That's
pocket
pretty cool.
of air. If you're checking all the marks and you said the story that we were told, I mean, it's checking everything is being true.
Yeah.
That's what I mentioned, a legend, because it's based on something. Someone was down there.
Yeah.
And then you arrive at, obviously, there is no chest. There is no chains from the ceiling of that place. It would be almost impossible to make it.
No chains from the ceiling?
So it was, for me, in the beginning, was a fun dive, a fun story to tell.
Yeah.
I went out of the hole, but my body, it didn't go out as it should. So I was waiting for him out there. I was checking on the time, said, this guy's not coming.
Yeah.
And I know how little air he had because it was very
Small
little bottles.
Yeah.
And in one moment that I was almost to prepare myself to go in again to try to find the man, I see the torch beam of the light in the hole, and I said, great, he's coming. But then it goes again. And well, to make the long story short, I went back again. He had lost the line. He just lost the line in the moment that he went to, I don't know, fix his mask or something, and he couldn't find the line again. He couldn't find the way out, and he was going around, and the only reason why he survived is because he went repeatedly back to this chamber and can breathe some air. It was as bad and as close as an accident at that. So he finally, when I went into the water, we stumbled on each other. I did have the line, so we went both out, and he was obviously very nervous. I was very nervous, and I was already in the safe side, and I was very nervous. And from then on, after this experience, when we left that province back to Havana, we were rethinking, well, why should we risk our lives in some things that they most probably belong to the urban legends and the imaginary of. So we went back to our files, this almost 500 files, and we analyzed them all slowly to see if anything was worth pursuing. And then we also, having such a big amount of information, we found 3 common points, let's call it this way, in each of the stories. First, the person that you interview, it hasn't seen the treasure. Never. The person you interviewed, I haven't seen it. I know where it is, but I haven't seen it. It was a dead person, a person that is not viable anymore. The one that actually saw the treasure, you will not be able to interview that person. So it's someone who already died. Another one is that there is always a dead person that comes back and tells some information to you or your uncle or your grandpa. So it's always a dead spirit coming back and saying, I know the treasure is here. That is enough for red flags, right? That sounds like enough. Well, there is still more. The one that saw the treasure didn't take it because it got scared. Since the very beginning, I was wondering why people would be scared of gold or silver. We are talking about things that are supposed to be in the poorest areas of the country. Fishermen towns in the middle of the mountains. These are very difficult access places. This is where people are poor, has always been poor. If you find a treasure, you take it. You take it, you use it, you go to the bank with it.
It doesn't matter the level of superstition that you believe in. You'll be like, gold. Okay, I'll take the chance.
But by all these stories, you get scared.
Yeah.
I mean, the natural reaction would be to get scared and continue living in poverty the rest of your life and leave the treasure there for your uncle or your niece going to a company and saying for 40 years later that they know where the treasure is. Okay. This helped us in shrinking down our interviews. Then eventually we stopped these interviews because we start with a test in the school. You start telling me the history. I said, the dead guy. Okay, it got scared. Yeah, sure. So when we have the four or 5 points already covered, they say, yeah, we will get in touch with you. Thank you very much for your cooperation. And it's gone. I mean, we didn't pursue anything of that.
Yeah.
I know this is a strange chapter. Look, we dove in the places we need to dive a couple of times. But this is just a fun stories of how myth and legends can get into historical research and what to do. At the end, it were good things to remember that it happened. And if any of you, I'm sure some of you will have buried treasure stories that want to share with us. So please get into the comment section. Just let us know what you think about this content and let's keep on diving.